A soldier came home and bought a forgotten house no one wanted. But the moment he stepped into the overgrown backyard, his dog stopped, dead still, staring at what looked like an old termite mound covered in wild grass. He thought it was nothing, until the first storm came, and something metal surfaced from the earth. His dog began to dig. What they found had been buried for nearly 50 years. A rusted box, a soldier's uniform, a pistol, and letters. Letters that had waited decades for someone to read them. Who was Daniel Whitmore? Why did he disappear after the war? And what secret was so dangerous that it had to be buried in silence? What happened next will make you hold your breath and believe that some dogs never forget what men try to. The morning air in rural Alabama still carried the chill of early spring. A fine mist curled over the red clay fields, and the wind moved slowly, like an old man reluctant to wake. Clouds hung low, casting a gray veil over the broken roofs and rusted mailboxes that lined the county road. In a town too small for traffic lights, silence wasn't absence. It was tradition. Michael Harris stood at the edge of his new yard, boots sunk slightly into the damp earth. He had just turned 35, though his gray-streaked hair and the lines beneath his eyes made him look older. His lean frame was wrapped in a faded army green jacket that had followed him through 5 tours, and his hands, calloused, steady, gripped the strap of a canvas duffel slung over one shoulder. A quiet man, Michael spoke only when necessary. He had learned that on the battlefield, but it had started long before. Losing his brother in Kandahar had carved something permanent into his chest, a hollow space that never quite refilled. At his heel walked Rex, his 9-year-old German shepherd, a veteran in his own right. Rex had a powerful, weathered build with a thick sable coat streaked with gray. His left ear stood straight while the right flopped, torn from a shrapnel wound long ago. His eyes, a deep amber, held a constant alertness, like he never really left combat. Michael had bought the property for $8,000, a steal, the real estate agent had said, even if it had some history. It was a small, 1-story house, paint peeling, porch boards warped, chimney leaning slightly like it had given up halfway. The backyard was wilder, as if the forest behind it had begun reclaiming the land. Tall weeds and ragged grass stretched waist-high in places. Rusted tools lay forgotten beneath a skeletal workbench, and a chain-link fence bowed under years of neglect. But it was the mound near the far corner that caught Rex's attention. It was no more than 3 feet tall, round like a loaf of risen bread, crusted and pale, with tufts of yellowing grass growing in a lopsided ring around it. It looked like an old termite mound, long abandoned and half swallowed by time. Rex froze. His posture stiffened. A low growl vibrated in his chest. Michael raised a brow. "What is it, boy?" Rex didn't move. He stared at the mound as if it had moved. Michael stepped closer and squatted beside it. He ran his hand along the earth. It felt oddly firm, not the crumbling kind you'd expect, but it was probably nothing, maybe an old tree root, or the foundation of some shed long gone. "Relax," Michael muttered, giving Rex a soft pat. "You're seeing ghosts." But Rex didn't blink. They went inside. The living room still smelled faintly of mildew and mouse droppings. Michael had started cleaning the week before, sweeping the dust, clearing the cobwebs, patching up cracked windows. A box fan buzzed on the floor, trying to chase out the stale air. Later that afternoon, as he worked on replacing part of the porch railing, a familiar voice called from behind the gate. "Michael Harris?" He turned. Standing there was Mrs. Evelyn Moore, his new neighbor from 2 houses down. She was in her late 60s, a short, apple-shaped woman in a floral windbreaker, with steel-gray hair tied in a bun and hands that looked like they'd known hard work. Her eyes were sharp, though, the kind that missed nothing. "Yes, ma'am," Michael said politely, setting down the hammer. Evelyn walked in like she'd known the yard longer than he had. "I saw the moving truck last week, but didn't want to bother you." Her tone was brisk but warm, the kind of Southern woman who told you her opinion whether you asked or not, but brought you pie anyway. "I just wanted to say welcome." I was real sorry to hear about your brother. Folks here remember him." Michael nodded with a faint smile. "Thank you." Her eyes drifted to the back of the yard. "I see the mound's still there." Michael tilted his head. "You know about it?" "Oh, honey," she sighed, arms crossed. "That house used to belong to a man named Daniel Whitmore. Quiet fella. Vietnam vet. Moved here in the mid-70s. Real private. Then one day, in 1980, gone. No goodbyes. No note. Just vanished." Michael said nothing, but Rex stood behind him, still facing the mound. "Sheriff poked around but never found anything. They just said maybe he left town. But he wouldn't leave without that old truck of his. I saw it parked out front for weeks." Her eyes lingered on the mound again. Michael glanced back toward it. "And no one ever dug there?" Evelyn shook her head. "People don't like disturbing things they don't understand." She smiled then, as if to soften her words. "But I'm sure it's nothing. Just an old piece of ground. Probably just a stump under there or a cement drain. Anyway, I'll let you settle in. If you ever need sugar, or stories you didn't ask for, you know where to find me." As she turned to go, Rex let out a low whine. Just once. Michael looked at him, then at the mound, and for the first time since arriving he felt like he wasn't alone in the yard. Not quite, not fully, just watched. Rain fell hard through the night, a steady drumming on the tin roof that masked every creak and rustle of the old house. Michael lay awake longer than he wanted to admit, not from nightmares. Those had dulled over the years, but from a sense of weight in his chest, something unshaped and lingering. By morning, the clouds had thinned into drifting mist, and the sun came reluctantly over the tree line. Rex was already at the back door when Michael entered the kitchen. The dog's ears were high, tail stiff, body leaned toward the yard with a tension that wasn't curiosity. It was concern. Michael followed his gaze to the far corner of the property. The mound. It looked different. He stepped outside, boots squishing in the soaked grass. Rex moved ahead, low to the ground. As they neared, Michael saw what had changed. The rain had caused part of the mound to erode, revealing the edge of something. A dull, rusted surface just barely peeking out of the earth. Rex stopped 3 feet away and let out a deep, guttural bark. Then another. He lunged forward, claws tearing through the wet dirt. His body trembled with urgency, like instinct had taken over. "Hey!" Michael called, moving fast. "Rex, stop!" But Rex didn't listen. His front paws were already muddy, digging fast. Then, as if not trusting Michael's delay, the dog turned and pulled at the hem of his jeans with his teeth, tugging twice, eyes wide, sharp with something Michael hadn't seen in years. Raw, alert fear. Michael dropped to one knee. He touched the metal. Cold, despite the morning warmth. Solid. Definitely not stone or pipe. A chill ran through him. He stood, staring down at the mound, rainwater still pooling around its base. The logical part of him whispered, buried debris, maybe some old septic tank, maybe part of a trailer frame. But something deeper in his bones, the same part of him that had once sensed when a roadside had been too quiet in Kandahar, whispered back, no. Before he could process further, the gate creaked open. A small voice called out, "Hi, Mr. Michael!" Turning, he saw Sophie, the girl from 2 doors down. She was around 10, petite and narrow-shouldered, with a wild nest of dirty blonde curls under a bike helmet, and front teeth still uneven from recent loss. She wore a faded pink jacket 2 sizes too big and pushed her bicycle by the handlebars with a slight limp in her right foot. "Can I say hi to Rex?" she asked, already halfway across the yard. Michael nodded. "Sure. Just be careful. It's muddy." Rex turned, instantly softened, tail swaying as he padded toward her. She dropped to her knees and scratched behind his ears like it was her morning routine. "You're his favorite," Michael said with a tired smile. Sophie grinned, then looked past him. "Is that weird dirt thing?" She pointed to the mound. "I told my friends it looks like a monster egg." Michael raised an eyebrow. "A monster egg?" "Yeah," she said, completely serious. "People say your backyard's haunted." Michael blinked. "Haunted?" She nodded and leaned in like she was sharing a family secret. My friend Kelsey said her uncle's friend used to deliver groceries here when she was little. Said a man lived here, but one day he was just gone. Nobody saw him leave, and his truck was still in the carport for months. Michael's chest tightened. Evelyn had said something similar, but hearing it from the mouth of a child, repeated like folklore, made it settle deeper. "Was this man's name Daniel?" he asked. Sophie shrugged. "Dunno. My mom says we shouldn't talk about things we don't understand. She gets nervous when I ride past this house." Michael exhaled slowly. "Well, there's no monsters here, just rain and mud." Sophie looked at Rex. Rex knows if something's bad. Dogs always know. Michael watched as Rex nudged his head into her palm, then turned back toward the mound again. One long glance. The feeling hadn't left. Sophie stayed for a while longer, telling Rex about school and a poem she had to memorize. Michael mostly listened in silence, head half in the conversation and half anchored to the thing behind him. When Sophie finally left, promising to bring Rex a biscuit tomorrow, Michael turned back to the exposed metal. He crouched down again, scraped a few handfuls of dirt aside. The surface was flat, painted once, now stripped to rust and corrosion. He couldn't tell how large it was or how deep it went, but this wasn't a rock. This wasn't some piece of trash. He brushed his hand along the edge again. It made a soft clang. Rex stood beside him. "All right," Michael whispered. "You've made your point." He didn't dig further that day. He didn't know why, but some quiet instinct told him, not yet. That evening he stayed out on the porch long after the sun had dipped below the trees. Rex sat at his feet, unmoving. The wind had picked up slightly, enough to rattle the loose tin siding and hum through the chimney bricks. But Michael wasn't thinking about the house. He was thinking about what waited beneath the soil, and why his dog knew to fear it. The next morning brought a deceptive calm to the yard, with the sun slicing through the mist in golden rays and robins chirping as though nothing strange had ever happened beneath the earth. But Michael knew better. His dreams had been scattered, fragmented images of rust and whispering voices. When he stepped onto the porch, shovel in hand, Rex was already pacing the edge of the yard, eyes fixed on the mound like a soldier guarding a perimeter. Michael tied his boots and crossed the lawn. The grass, though wet, was soft from yesterday's rain. But the mound's soil was different. It had dried overnight, forming a crust that felt like packed clay. He planted the shovel and pressed down hard. The blade barely pierced the surface. It took him nearly 20 minutes to loosen the topsoil, his breath turning short and sharp. Rex hovered nearby, pacing back and forth, occasionally letting out a low growl, tail stiff. Michael paused to wipe his brow. "You're making me nervous, buddy." Then a clang. The sound echoed through the silence like a dropped bell. Michael knelt, scraping dirt away with his hands. Beneath the layer of hard-packed earth was a metal box, large and rectangular, maybe 2 feet wide by 1.5 deep. Its corners were dented, and the top bore streaks of rust, but it held firm against his touch. He dug around the edges, loosening the ground until he could see nearly all of it. It had weight, whatever it was. There was no lock, just corrosion. His fingers brushed across faint letters etched into the lid. D. Whitmore. Barely visible beneath the years. Michael's breath caught. That wasn't just a box. It was a name. He ran a hand through his hair. D. Whitmore. Could it be Daniel Whitmore? The soldier Evelyn had mentioned? The same man who had disappeared decades ago? Before he could process further, Rex barked. Loudly. Michael jerked up, instinctively looking toward the source of the sound. Rex was at the edge of the yard, by the old chain-link fence, growling at something, or someone, just out of sight. "Easy," Michael called, standing. A shadow moved beyond the fence. From the gravel side path a man appeared, tall, broad-shouldered, mid-60s. He wore a tan windbreaker, slacks that had seen better days, and carried a cane more for image than need. His salt and pepper hair was slicked back, and his face, weathered and angular, held a charm that looked deliberate, like a man used to negotiating his way out of uncomfortable rooms. The man raised a hand in casual greeting. "Morning. Didn't mean to startle you." he said, stepping closer to the fence. "Harold Grant. Live 2 blocks down, past the old mill. Thought I'd drop by and say welcome." Michael nodded slowly, his body tense. "Michael?" "Nice place," Harold continued, eyes wandering past Michael too deliberately to the mound behind him. "Didn't think anyone would ever move into this old ghost plot." "Why's that?" Michael asked. Harold gave a soft chuckle. "Oh, just rumors. You know small towns. That backyard's been the subject of a dozen ghost stories and at least 2 drunk confessions." Michael said nothing. Rex, meanwhile, stood between them like a drawn line, silent but rigid, ears back, gaze locked on Harold like he was made of lies. Harold chuckled again, this time more forced. "Your dog doesn't like me much." "He's a good judge of character," Michael said without smiling. There was a pause. Harold tapped his cane against the fence. "Well, if you ever need help fixing up the place, I used to be a contractor. Still got tools. Hell, I helped lay down the foundation for this house back in the 80s. Michael blinked. "You knew the guy who lived here before?" Harold shifted slightly. "Sort of. Daniel Whitmore. Saw him around. Real quiet type. Kept to himself. And then one day, poof, gone. Left the house locked, truck untouched. Cops did what they could, but you know how that goes." Michael looked at him a moment longer. "Did you know him well?" "Not really," Harold said too quickly, then added, "just enough to say hi." He glanced again at the back of the yard. "Say, what's that old mound back there? It wasn't always there, was it?" Michael stiffened. "Just dirt. Maybe from an old tree root or something." Harold nodded, then shrugged like it didn't matter. "Well, welcome again. You picked a hell of a fixer-upper." Michael didn't respond. He waited until Harold turned and walked off before speaking again. Rex stayed stiff as stone until the man disappeared around the corner of the property. Michael exhaled hard. Then he turned back toward the box. He ran his fingers across the name again. D. Whitmore. Why was it buried here, and why did Harold Grant care so much? He didn't have answers yet, but he had questions now, and something told him Rex had been right to bark. The morning sun filtered through the thin curtains of Michael's kitchen, casting a muted glow over the wood floorboards. The air felt heavier than usual, dense with memory and meaning. On the table sat the box he'd unearthed, the one etched with the name D. Whitmore. He'd spent half the night staring at it, unsure whether to open it. The tension in his chest hadn't faded, not even after Harold's departure. Something about that man's interest lingered, oily and invasive. Michael trusted Rex's instincts more than his own lately, and Rex had not liked Harold one bit. With a slow breath, Michael reached for the rusted lid and pried it open. A metallic creak echoed in the stillness of the house. Inside, wrapped carefully in faded olive-green cloth, was a folded military uniform, meticulously preserved despite the years. On top of it lay a standard-issue sidearm, a Colt .45 its surface dulled with time, but still dignified. Below that was a paper envelope, yellowed and sealed with a fragile wax stamp. At the bottom, tucked beside the fabric, sat a pair of dog tags, slightly tarnished but still legible. Daniel Whitmore, U.S. Army. Michael's fingers trembled slightly as he picked up the envelope. The seal broke with a brittle crack, and inside, written in neat but urgent cursive, was a letter, "To whoever finds this box. If you're reading this, it means they didn't get to it first. My name is Daniel Whitmore. I served in Vietnam from 1969 to 1974. I came home with secrets I wasn't supposed to carry. There were things we were ordered not to talk about. But I did. I told one man. And after that, the threats began. Letters. Unmarked cars parked near my home. A warning disguised as kindness. I buried this box the day I realized I was being followed. If they found it, I'd be erased like the others. So I disappeared before they could make me disappear for good. If you have this, be careful. Don't trust anyone too quickly. And for God's sake, don't let them know you found it. D. Whitmore. Michael sat back in his chair, stunned. The words rattled something deep in his chest. As a veteran himself, he'd carried his own ghosts, but this was something else. A man driven into hiding by his own country? Or was it paranoia? He didn't know yet, but something told him to believe Daniel. Rex, who had been lying by the back door, stirred. The German shepherd stood, ears pricked. His coat, though grizzled with age, still held its proud sable sheen. Scars lined his hind leg, remnants of a roadside bomb years ago, and his left ear bent permanently from shrapnel. But his instincts remained razor-sharp. He approached Michael, sniffed the open box, then nudged the jacket with his snout. "Careful," Michael murmured. But Rex didn't stop. He pawed at the coat, then bit gently at the inner lining. Something crinkled. Michael leaned in, frowning. "What is it, boy?" From inside the jacket's inner pocket, Rex tugged free a small, folded slip of paper, almost brittle from time. Michael opened it carefully. On it, in hastily written pencil, were just a few chilling words. "Don't let anyone find this box. They'll come back." Michael swallowed hard. Rex whined, as if sensing the shift in mood. Whatever this was, it wasn't just a footlocker of old belongings. It was a warning, buried in time. Later that afternoon, he made his way across the gravel path toward the neighbor's porch. Evelyn Moore was sitting outside in a rocking chair, wearing her signature oversized sun hat and a cardigan, even though the sun was warm. She was in her mid-80s, with hair as white as milkweed and eyes that had seen too much. Her voice always held a kind of hush, as though everything she said was being measured against some unseen past. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said when Michael approached. He gave a slight smile. "I think I've met one." She raised a brow. "I found something buried in the yard. Belonged to a man named Daniel Whitmore. Does that name mean anything to you?" Evelyn's face shifted. Subtly, but unmistakably. She stopped rocking. "Daniel," she said slowly. "Yes, I remember him. Quiet man. Moved in right after the war, around 75. Kept to himself. Nice, though. Always trimmed the hedges. Played jazz on the porch some nights." "What happened to him?" Evelyn looked out at the field. "He vanished. Summer of 1980. No one ever found a body, no sign of a struggle. It was like he folded into the wind." Michael hesitated, then asked, "Do you think he left on purpose?" "I think," she said carefully, "Daniel was scared. He came back different. Not just warsick, truly afraid. He'd look over his shoulder even in daylight, said things were still watching him." "Who?" Michael pressed, but Evelyn just shook her head. "He never said." Rex sat quietly beside Michael, his body still, but his eyes never left Evelyn's face. She looked down at him and softened. "Your dog, he's sharp. Keeps you safe?" Michael nodded. "Always." "You'll need that," she murmured. "If the box is open, then something's been let out. I don't mean ghosts, son. I mean curiosity. And curiosity around here gets noticed." Michael stayed silent. Evelyn gave him a final, knowing look, then turned her eyes back to the rocking horizon. As Michael and Rex walked back home, wind rustled the grass like a whispered name. The world hadn't changed since he opened the box, but the weight of it felt heavier. And behind them, somewhere just beyond the trees, a black sedan sat parked beneath the shade, engine silent, windows tinted too dark for the day. The Alabama sky had taken on a strange stillness by dusk, like it was holding its breath. Crickets had gone quiet. Even the breeze that usually stirred the tall grass around Michael's backyard was absent. Inside the dimly lit kitchen, Michael sat at the table, the opened letter from Daniel Whitmore laid out before him, its final line repeating in his mind like a pulse. "Don't let anyone find this box. They'll come back." Rex lay by the back door, his ears twitching with alertness, eyes fixed on the shadows gathering beyond the fence line. The German shepherd's usual calm had shifted since the box was unearthed. Every sound set him on edge. Every unfamiliar scent made him rise. He was 10 years old now, battle-worn and scarred, but his instincts hadn't dulled. The first bark came just past midnight. Sharp, guttural, urgent. Michael shot up, knocking his chair to the floor. Rex was already at the back door, snarling, his whole body bristling. Through the glass, Michael spotted it, a figure, motionless, standing at the far edge of the yard, half concealed behind the unkempt wooden fence. The shape wasn't moving. It was watching. Michael rushed outside, flashlight in hand, but by the time the beam cut through the dark, the figure was gone. In its place were fresh boot prints in the soil and something else, tire marks, etched deep in the gravel near the driveway. Recent. Unmistakable. He scanned the road. Nothing but empty blacktop curling into the trees. Whoever had come wasn't here anymore, but they had been. "Good boy," he whispered to Rex, who stood planted and growling softly at the fence line. The next morning, Sophie came skipping down the road with a worn backpack slung over her shoulder and a bouquet of dandelions in hand. The 10-year-old girl had become a daily visitor lately, drawn by Rex's presence more than anything. She was small, freckled, with untamable red curls and a smile that seemed too wide for her thin face. Her sneakers were always dirty, and her elbows often bore the badges of some minor adventure scrapes, scratches, stains of living wildly. "You should keep your gate locked," she said without a greeting, eyeing the gravel with suspicion. "My grandpa says weird folks drive through here at night." Michael gave a nod, crouching to examine the tire tracks again. "You ever see anyone?" Sophie wrinkled her nose. "Not at night, but a man came by the school the other day, asked Miss Fielder about your house, said he was an old friend of Mr. Daniels." Michael's spine stiffened. "Did you catch his name?" She shook her head. "But he had a mustache, kinda yellow, like he smoked a lot. He asked if anyone new moved in. When Miss Fielder said a soldier bought it, he didn't say anything else, just left." Michael felt the old military instinct rising, the one that taught you when a perimeter had been breached. Someone knew he'd found the box. Someone who cared enough to sniff around a school, around a child. Sophie pulled a biscuit out of her pocket and offered it to Rex, who took it gently. "So," she added casually, "a man followed me yesterday." Michael turned sharp. "What?" "Down by Old Mill Street," she said, still petting Rex. "He was walking behind me for a while, then he stopped when Rex barked. Real loud." Michael crouched to her level, voice low but firm. "Sophie, if anyone follows you again, you run straight here or home. You understand?" She nodded, suddenly serious. Later that afternoon, Michael walked the path Sophie had mentioned. Old Mill Street was mostly abandoned cracked sidewalks and rusted mailboxes. A perfect place for someone to blend into nothing. He found fresh boot prints near a telephone pole and a crushed cigarette still warm beneath his boot. The sun dipped low, setting the sky aflame with burnt orange and crimson. As Michael and Rex returned to the house, a figure stepped from behind a tree. Harold Grant. He wore a beige windbreaker, his thinning blonde hair swept back from a wrinkled forehead. The mustache Sophie mentioned. There it was, tobacco-stained and twitching nervously. "Evening," Harold said with a smile too wide to trust. Michael kept his tone even. "You back for another chat?" Harold shoved his hands into his pockets. "Just thought I'd check in. Curious about that box you found. Any treasures in it?" Michael didn't answer. Harold leaned a little closer. "You know, some things are best left buried. Soldiers like you, sometimes you bring ghosts home. Maybe don't dig too deep." Rex moved between them, growling. Harold chuckled nervously and backed away. "Smart dog." Michael didn't speak. He just watched as Harold disappeared back down the road, his shadow stretching long behind him. That night, Michael stood in the living room staring at the box. Beside him, Rex sat like a statue. Somewhere outside, the wind howled, and a distant sound, a car door slamming, echoed down the hill. The Alabama morning sun cut through the fog like a blade, streaking gold across the weathered porch as Michael sat with the box on his lap. The house was silent, but his thoughts roared. The cracked leather of his old combat boots tapped the wooden floor in rhythm with his pulse. He'd seen war, betrayal, and loss. But this was different. This was a ghost refusing to stay buried. Rex sat directly in front of the box, unmoving, his amber eyes locked on Michael. The German shepherd, 10 years old, sable coat dusted with silver, had barely left the box's side since the night Harold Grant reappeared. His posture was rigid, one bent ear twitching at the slightest noise. If dogs could speak, Rex would have already shouted, "This matters." Michael ran a hand through his short brown hair, streaked with gray. The thought had weighed on him all night. Should he keep the contents of the box quiet, protect whatever truth Daniel had hidden, or report it? The letter had warned of danger. The visits from Harold, Sophie being followed. These weren't coincidences, but if Daniel Whitmore had truly been hunted for knowing too much, then someone out there still cared what he knew, and that meant Michael was sitting on a loaded gun. He reached for his phone and paused, thumb hovering. Then he tapped the name. Dean Wallace. Dean had been a supervising agent with the FBI when Michael was still enlisted. The man was sharp, dark-skinned, bald, with a salt-and-pepper beard, and known for his no-nonsense approach to national security. He had a slow, commanding voice that made people shut up and listen. They hadn't spoken in 3 years. Dean picked up on the second ring. "Rhodes? Yeah, it's me. I need a favor." 10 minutes later, Michael had relayed the entire story, minus the money, for now. The rusted box, the uniform, the letter, the name, Daniel Whitmore. Dean was quiet for a moment, then said, "Daniel Whitmore was scheduled to testify in 1980 in a case that went nowhere. Arms smuggling linked to rogue military contractors using leftover Vietnam supply lines. The morning of the trial, he vanished." "Dead?" Michael asked. "No body, no witnesses. We assumed he ran or was eliminated, but nobody found him. You're telling me he buried everything behind your house?" Michael looked down at Rex, who still hadn't moved. "Not just that," he said. "There's more." After the call ended, Michael pried deeper into the box. The inside was more layered than he had thought. As he turned it over carefully, a dull clink caught his attention. Rex stood up immediately, sniffing around the base. Michael felt around and found a loose metal plate beneath the box's bottom seam. It came off with a little pressure, and behind it, tucked tight, was a small canvas pouch. It smelled of mildew and old sweat. Inside were bundles of cash, faded greenbacks held together by disintegrating rubber bands. He counted silently. 10, 20, $30,000, maybe more. But what stopped him wasn't the money, it was the seal on the bills. They bore the name of a bank that had gone bankrupt in 1976. "Why would a soldier hide money from a dead bank?" he muttered. Rex growled low. Not hostile, just insistent. Michael took a breath. This wasn't just some old man's secret. It was something someone wanted badly enough to follow a child, to stand in the dark behind his fence, to sniff around a school pretending to be a friend. Dean called back that evening. "I pulled the files. Daniel's testimony would have implicated several high-ranking officials, some of whom went on to work in private defense sectors. Most are dead or retired, but one name might still matter. Richard Lyle." Michael didn't know the name. Dean continued, "He owns a logistics firm in Georgia, used to be quartermaster in Vietnam, controlled inventory shipments. He vanished from the case file after Daniel disappeared." Michael exhaled slowly. "So, what now?" Dean's voice lowered. "Now, I come to you." That night, Michael locked the box inside an old trunk in his attic. He couldn't shake the thought that eyes might still be watching. He drew the curtains, installed a new lock on the back gate, and as the wind picked up outside, carrying the scent of rain, he sat on the floor beside Rex. "You knew," he whispered. "You always know." Rex nudged his hand and laid his head on Michael's knee. By the time the sun rose over the rolling fields of rural Alabama, the once-forgotten farmstead had transformed into an active federal scene. Black SUVs with tinted windows lined the dirt road. A mobile FBI command post hummed near the barn. Agents in Navy windbreakers swept through the property, marking evidence and photographing the rusted box, the soil around the mound, and every inch of the back fence where the intruders had previously stood. Dean Wallace stepped out of his SUV, a tall, commanding figure in his early 60s. He wore a charcoal overcoat over a tailored navy suit, his salt and pepper beard trimmed close, and his eyes sharp beneath the brim of a low cap. He moved with quiet authority, radiating calm amidst the chaos. Michael met him halfway across the porch. "Morning," he said. Dean nodded. "Place hasn't changed much since the Cold War, has it?" "No, but the ghosts got louder." Inside the house, the rusted box sat on the table, now surrounded by agents. The uniform had been gently unfolded and sealed in a bag. The letter, photographs, and Daniel's old sidearm had all been documented. What stunned Dean most was the untouched integrity of the evidence. "This box," he murmured, "is 30 years of silence in a single breath." Michael nodded grimly. "And someone doesn't want it to be heard." As the team prepared to secure the area for forensic work, Dean pulled Michael aside. "We traced Daniel Whitmore's last known contact. 2 weeks before his trial, he wrote a letter to a retired colonel. He was afraid. He mentioned names that were scrubbed from the final case file, names that still carry weight." Just then, Rex, now wearing a new bandana Sophie had given him that morning, perked up his ears. His tail stiffened, hackles rising. A low, guttural growl rumbled from his throat. Michael turned. "What is it, boy?" A sharp whistle rang out through the trees. Then it happened fast. A gray pickup truck burst through the far tree line behind the property, speeding toward the house. 2 men in dark clothing jumped from the bed before it even stopped, weapons in hand. A third scrambled around the side gate, heading toward the house. "Down!" Dean shouted, drawing his weapon. Agents moved quickly, but the attackers were desperate and reckless. One fired a warning shot into the air. Michael grabbed Sophie, who had been sitting on the porch sketching Rex, and pulled her inside. The sound of barking and shouting filled the air. Rex lunged. Without hesitation, the German Shepherd sprinted down the steps, straight toward the man aiming at Dean. The attacker faltered at the sight of the massive dog barreling toward him. He fired once, the shot grazing Rex's side, but Rex didn't stop. He leapt, teeth bared, and latched onto the man's arm. The gun clattered to the ground. Dean tackled the man just as Rex drove him backward into the dirt. The second assailant tried to circle around toward the barn. Another agent intercepted him. The third, still running, was caught at the tree line by 2 agents in tactical gear. It was over in under 5 minutes. Dean cuffed the wounded man, his voice cold. "You picked the wrong place, friend." Michael dropped beside Rex, checking his side. Blood stained the dog's fur, but the wound was shallow. "You crazy mutt," he whispered, running a hand over Rex's head. "You saved our lives." Sophie peeked from the window, eyes wide. "He's a hero." Dean crouched beside them, breathing hard. These weren't amateurs. One of them had a fake badge NSA. These men were sent to recover the box or destroy it. Michael stood, anger tightening his voice. "And they would have killed a child to do it?" Dean nodded. "We'll take them in. We'll reopen the case." Later that day, local reporters caught wind of the incident. A camera crew arrived, and though Michael avoided speaking, the image of Rex bandaged and still alert made the evening news. The townsfolk gathered by dusk. Evelyn Moore stood near the gate with a cane in one hand and her worn cardigan buttoned all the way to her neck. She wiped tears from her eyes. "I always knew this land wasn't done talking," she whispered. By nightfall, someone had hung a handmade sign over Michael's front porch, "Home of the Four-Legged Hero." The sun over Alabama that morning was soft and golden, casting long shadows across the fields where summer wildflowers began to bloom. The air smelled of damp earth and new beginnings. What once had been a haunting place, a backyard marked by secrets and fear, now felt like something sacred. Michael stood at the back of the house, staring at the spot where the termite mound-shaped patch had once stood. The earth was smooth now, the grass replanted, and in its center he had placed a stone ring, carefully filled with blooming black-eyed Susans and purple coneflowers. A wooden sign staked in the soil simply read, "In memory of Daniel Whitmore, U.S. Army, 1946 to 1980. Rex lay beside the garden bed, his silver-flecked coat gleaming in the light. He was almost 11 now, his movements slower, but his eyes sharp and proud. Around his neck was a new collar made of sturdy black leather. Hanging from it was a brass tag, freshly engraved, Guardian. That morning, Sophie had come over in her usual cheerful way, swinging a cloth bag. "It's not much," she had said shyly, her freckled cheeks red with excitement. "But I wanted him to have something. He saved me, remember?" Sophie, now more confident after the incident with the stranger weeks ago, had become a regular visitor. She was tall for her 10 years, always in oversized sweaters and with untied shoelaces. Her parents, especially her mother Rachel, a quiet woman with tired eyes and a warm voice, had been grateful beyond words. Rachel had even started bringing over small dishes, peach cobbler, biscuits, or her famous cornbread. Inside the house, things had changed too. The once dusty rooms now gleamed with life. Michael had painted the walls pale blue, hung up pictures of his old platoon, and added a bookshelf filled with war history, poetry, and books Sophie had given him. On a shelf near the window sat the weathered box now empty next to a framed copy of Daniel's letter. A second frame held the dog tag, D. Whitmore, still slightly rusted but preserved behind glass. Michael never forgot what Dean had told him during the FBI debriefing. Daniel had a choice. He could have vanished and stayed hidden forever, but instead he buried the truth where he hoped someone with a good heart and a good dog might one day find it. Dean Wallace had kept his word. The items discovered Daniel's uniform, his letter, the old handgun, and the faded banknotes were now part of a permanent exhibit at the Alabama Veterans History Museum. Michael had attended the opening ceremony just last week. The local paper had called it "A Soldier's Secret Unearthed by a K-9 Hero." The story had spread gently across the town and beyond. What surprised Michael most was the invitation. The museum director, a thin, meticulous woman named Grace Allen, had asked him personally, "Would you consider being a guest speaker for our younger visitors? They'd learn more from you than from any textbook." Grace was in her early 60s, with cropped silver hair and a voice that carried confidence without harshness. She had served as a military nurse in the 80s, and there was a quiet strength in how she stood. When she'd shaken Michael's hand, she had added, "Men like Daniel often get forgotten. You and Rex reminded us why their stories still matter." Michael agreed, though not right away. It took him a week and a long walk with Rex through the foggy pine trees behind his property. It wasn't the speaking part that made him nervous, it was the act of remembering out loud. But then he saw Sophie trying to explain Daniel's story to a group of kids at the library, holding the newspaper article with pride, her small finger tracing over Rex's picture saying, "He's not just a dog. He's the kind that remembers." That night, Michael sat down, lit a candle, and began writing the speech. Not as a soldier, but as a man who once came home looking for silence and found a voice buried in the soil. As the season turned, the garden behind his house became something of a local secret. Neighbors stopped by, some bringing flowers, others just to sit and think. Someone left an old pair of dog tags once, no name, just a date and the word brother. Michael didn't ask questions. He let the soil keep its whispers. One morning, as he drank his coffee and watched Rex sunbathe by the flowers, Dean visited one last time. The agent had aged more than Michael remembered, gray in his beard, a stiffness in his gait. They sat on the back porch in silence before Dean finally said, "You know, most people would have just buried it again." Michael looked down at Rex, whose ears flicked as a bird chirped in the distance. "Not when he was watching," Michael replied. Dean nodded, placing a hand on Michael's shoulder. "Not everyone's meant to unearth the past, but some of us are just stubborn enough to do it right." They stood together as the wind picked up. The petals from the cone flowers danced into the air, catching the light like tiny sunbursts. Michael smiled. The house wasn't just a place now. It was a witness, a monument, a home. Sometimes the ones who guide us back to truth don't speak our language. They bark, they wait, they protect. Rex was more than a dog. He was a guardian, a messenger, and a bridge between past and present. Through instinct, loyalty, and courage, he uncovered a truth buried for decades and helped a broken soldier find purpose again. But maybe it wasn't just instinct. Maybe it was God working through a wounded canine to remind us that nothing truly good is ever lost. It's just waiting to be found, by the right heart at the right time. In a world that often feels loud and dark, may we all have the eyes to see, the faith to act, and the courage to dig deeper, even when the soil is hard and the truth uncomfortable. Because healing sometimes begins with the quiet nudge of a loyal companion, and a whisper only the soul can hear. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who believes that animals are more than pets. They are protectors, healers, even angels in fur. Comment Amen below if you believe that God still works in mysterious ways, and sometimes sends his miracles with 4 paws and a scarred heart. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with us for more stories that remind us of the power of love, loyalty, and the quiet miracles happening all around us. May God bless you and every soul who watches this.